Gators Breakdown episode 78 is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters, and you can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SDC. And the normal co-host join me tonight, Joe Vizzi and Bill Sykes. You can find Joe on Twitter at JoeV_GatorsPod and Bill Sykes on Twitter at RealBSykes. Guys, thanks for joining me. We got a real good one. I know we've teased this one for a couple weeks now, and I know we're all excited to have our guest Cole Cubelic on from SEC Network.
Man, yeah. I can't wait to talk offensive line with Cole. I think it's a position near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, it's great to have on somebody that is about the realest person you'll find analyzing college football. I absolutely love him on Twitter. I love him on television, and he keeps it real, man. He doesn't sugarcoat anything, and not many people follow the SEC like Cole does, and it's great to have him on.
For sure. Auburn Center from 1997 to 2000. That's right, Cole?
Absolutely, yes.
All right. As we mentioned, you can find him on the SEC Network. Also, you can find Cole on Twitter at Cole Cubelic, ColeCubelic. Also, Cole can be found on his radio show, The Cole Cubelic Show, on Sports Radio, 7:30 a.m. and 103.9, The Ump in Huntsville, Alabama. Cole, thanks for joining us here on Gators Breakdown.
Hey, man, I'm glad to be with you guys. I appreciate you having me. Looking forward to it.
All right, Cole, you played Florida every year in your career at Auburn, and I really hate seeing that rivalry between the two schools being hardly played anymore. What memories do you have of the matchups versus Florida during your career there?
No good ones. That wasn't a positive rivalry for me when I was in school. We were fortunate enough to get to the SEC championship game my senior year, and we lost to Florida twice that year. The Tyrannosaurus Rex offense that took us down two times, one in Gainesville, one in Atlanta, obviously under Coach Spurrier. But they were always a team just loaded with talent. I remember how huge the game was in '97 when they came to Jordan-Hare, and seeing Jaquez Green throw a touchdown, rush a touchdown, and catch a touchdown pass in that game. I think there was two top 10 teams in that matchup at Jordan-Hare Stadium. So they were always loaded with talent. We had an 8 o'clock kick, I believe it was in '99, back at Jordan-Hare Stadium, and I can remember everybody was going crazy for Alex Brown. It was a couple weeks after he had I guess it was 7 sacks against Tennessee. So we're sliding our protection to him, and we're keeping tight ends and running backs over to him. And I think he rushed the passer probably twice in that game, and they soon blitzed us to the other direction. By the time we figured out what was going on, it was way too late. So always quality teams, always a ton of talent over there. Gerard Warren is a guy that I'll never forget playing against. Your big money was just tough to be lined up in a zero or a shade nose at 6'4", 310, 320. As quick as he was, he'd give you some headaches. So I'm just proud to say I held my own against the dude, playing against him twice in one season. So a lot of fun.
Yeah, those are some monster defensive lines backs for Spurrier in that time. Cole, you'll be now on the SEC Network Saturday night telecast. I think that means you'll be in Gainesville week 2, I believe, when Florida plays Northern Colorado. Who else and what would that telecast bring to the table?
Well, we have not received official assignments yet, so obviously we're slotted for that time spot. But if you guys recall last year, we had the noon crew, Andre Ware, Tom Hart, and myself, but we had that Florida UMass opener there on Saturday night of week 1. So sometimes early in the season, these things get jumbled around, so we're not guaranteed to be in that slot on the network just yet.
Gotcha.
But I would, it's probably safe to assume that that's where we're going to be most weekends. If we're there week 2, I'll be excited to see this team. And I just think I think Tom Hart's one of the best in the business at any sport. I mean, baseball, basketball, football. He's an astute play-by-play guy. As talented as anybody out there, does an excellent job. He's entertaining, which is something that I appreciate. And I think Jordan brings some legitimate quarterback credentials to our crew and knows this conference, played in this conference. He's a little bit younger, so he knows some of the new players that do our offense a little bit better than Tom and I will. And they both seem to enjoy the sideline analyst role, which is what I'll be playing. And I enjoy bringing my perspective to the broadcast, being up that close to the action.
Hey, Cole, I think I speak from my compadres here that if something falls through and you need somebody to stand in, we'll be glad to help you call a game.
I'll keep you in mind.
Well, I couldn't call a game next to Jordan Rogers. He's too pretty for me. He would just make me look like trash. So
speak for yourself, Joey.
Some guys are pretty, some guys just know football. So I have to play one of them.
Fair enough.
He has the best hair in the business, and David and I could use some of it right now.
For sure. I need it. All right, before we dive into all this Gators coverage with Cole, remember you can find all your Gators Breakdown episodes on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. Just search on those sites or get the links by following Gators Breakdown on Twitter and on Facebook at Gators Breakdown. Please remember, when you're on iTunes, rate and review the show. Let Gator Nation know what they're getting with Gators Breakdown. So, Cole, SEC Media Days was a couple weeks ago, and you shared your picks for the SEC, and you picked the Gators to win the SEC East. What made you pick the Gators over Georgia? And with that, would you have Florida second overall in the SEC?
That'd be an interesting debate to line up Florida, Auburn, and LSU, and I guess you would throw Georgia in the mix there too, which obviously I picked Florida in the East, so they would be over Georgia. But yeah, I think Auburn's a team that has probably bigger ifs than Florida, whereas if one or two things turns out to be what we think it could be, then I would probably take Auburn as the number 2 team. LSU sort of the same way. It's funny how they all sort of have some similarities as to they all have talent on the offensive line. We need to see how they're going to manage it and figure it out. They all took huge hits along the defensive lines and front sevens. We need to see how those guys are going to be replaced. But obviously quarterback is, I think, what separates some of those. And a lot of people are extremely confident in Jarrett Stidham and what he'll do and what he'll be. And if he is, then I think Auburn could be a 2, maybe a 1 in the SEC when it's all said and done. But a lot has to happen for that to take place. I have to think with LSU, it's hard for me to count them out when you have as much ability on the field as they do. And I'm a big fan of Matt Canada as their new offensive coordinator and what he does, how he's going to manage things. I think he'll simplify things for his guys, but it's going to be very confusing for their opponents. And William Clapp moves down from guard to center. I think he can be sort of the anchor of that offensive line. And when you got a legit center and the best tailback in college football in Darius Guy, that's a pretty good place to start. And a couple of receivers that can make plays. So I'm not ready to count LSU out just yet. But right now, I'd probably say Florida 2 and Auburn 3. And then Georgia and LSU could be a coin flip for 4. The main reasons that I went Florida winning the East, first and foremost, for Jim McElwain. I think he's the second best coach in the SEC. I still don't think he gets enough credit for what kind of coach that he is. And I think we'll probably learn even more about him as a coach this year because he had more staff turnover and pretty significant staff turnover. And coaches who can survive that and thrive after that, to me, are ones that really prove themselves to be deserving of being mentioned as some of the best coaches in college football. But there's so much to like on this football team. I've said, you guys probably saw me going back and forth even tonight on Twitter about this offensive line. I believe it's the most talented in the SEC. Now, I'm not going to get into recruiting stars when we talk about that because I don't really care where kids are raised coming out of high school, to be honest with you. When I say that Florida has the most talented offensive line returning, that's based on what I've seen these guys do in college football games. I don't care what they did at a Spark camp. I don't care what they did at the Elite 11. I don't care what they did at some Under Armour combine. And I sure as hell don't care what they did in 2 or 3A football in some other state. So based on what I've seen these guys do in games, and I know what they're capable of, this is the most talented offensive line in the SEC. Now, do I have my concerns about Martez Ivey going to tackle? Yeah, absolutely. He gets out on his toes. He overextends a little bit. He gets lost in space at times. His feet get a little bit heavy. Those are things that can't happen at tackle. You're going to get beat on a regular basis. But I've also seen him do some things that somebody his size at 6'5", 310, 315 should not be able to do. And the wingspan that he has is perfect to play tackle. I know he did it in high school, so he has some familiarity with it. He's repped it a little bit. We saw him there against South Carolina a year ago. I thought Juwan Taylor was the second best right tackle in the SEC last fall, behind Jonah Williams, who might have been the best tackle in the SEC last year. And he'll go over to left for Alabama this fall. And TJ McCoy is the most physical center in the SEC, and I really don't think it's close. We'll hear a lot about other guys being preseason All-SEC and All-American and Remington Award watch list, whatever, but there's not many many guys in this league, really across the country, to get consistent movement at the point of attack from the center position like TJ McCoy does. So I've seen Fred Johnson play in games. I understand what this offensive line has and what they're all about. And so with Tyler Jordan back as well, that's why I have them as the most talented group in the league. I still want to see how it's going to work out. Still want to see how they're going to play together. But they have a chance to be the best offensive line in the SEC this season. Now, having a new offensive line coach can help or hurt. Sometimes that breathes new life into certain guys. And for me, I had a personal experience like that in college where I had an offensive line coach change, and it ended up being great for myself and multiple teammates of mine. You look behind that group, loaded at tailback, a couple of solid tight ends, uber talented at wide receiver, and everyone's going to obsess about the quarterback and what can the quarterback do and who the quarterback's going to be. But to me, I look at it more big picture, as in with everything that I just named, the quarterback shouldn't have to do too much. And if you can find consistency, which is the one thing Jim McElwain hasn't had since he's been in Florida, and that's quarterback consistency start to finish. The good news for me is there are options. There are different style options at that position that he'll have to choose from, and he'll have a little bit of depth. And that's something that I think has hurt him the past few seasons of maybe finding a guy and looking like things are going to be able to get going and get cranked up. And then when you lose that guy, it's kind of like you got a lot of people looking left and right, not really sure of where to go next. So offensively, I don't have near as big a concerns as a lot of other people do about Florida. On defense, there are legitimate concerns. You don't lose some of the guys up front, like a Caleb Brantley, and like a Gerard Davis, and an Alex Anzalone, and a Brian Cox Jr., and expect to just roll back in and be the same. I've tried to explain this to Alabama fans this entire offseason, is that defensive line is just not going to be the same. I'm not saying they won't be good, but they're not going to be the same. But I've seen Taven Bryan on film. I've seen Kari Clark on film. I've seen what C.C. Jefferson and Zuniga can do, and I'm pretty confident that the first 4 or 5 of those guys can be a problem, can be a handful for most offensive lines that they're going to face this season. And listen, there's a big loss in the back end with Marcel Harris out about a week or 2 ago. It's not going to help, but I think Chauncey Gardner can be a big-time corner in this league, and I think Washington's enough at safety. And I don't think listen, I love Jeff Collins. I'm a huge Jeff Collins fan. But I don't think they're taking a step back with Randy Shannon as the defensive coordinator now. There's enough talent to go around. There's enough guys who can do good things to where, to me, this defense can be just as athletic, just as active, maybe not as deep as it's been the past 2 years, but if the offense takes the next step, the defense might not have to be as dominant as they've needed to be to get to Atlanta the previous 2 seasons.
I think you've got our listeners gator chomping right now. Cole, you mentioned a lot of things I'd like to hit on there, but the one thing specifically, you talk about the offensive line and how talented it is. This is an interesting season for the Gator offensive line because for the first time since at least the Urban Meyer era, they have 4 legitimate starters coming back. There are 4 guys stepping in. That hasn't happened since at least 2005, and I don't believe even then. At the same time, this is the youngest offensive line to start, second youngest after 2016, which was last year. These guys only averaged 2.6 years in the program. That includes redshirt years and what have you. Can you talk a little bit about how continuity plays into the success of an offensive line versus youth? How it's kind of just interesting how those 2 things are going to be going on, youth on one hand, but continuity developing on the other.
Yeah, there's so much communication that takes place along the offensive line week in and week out, when you're, especially with the athletes and the type of defenses that you're seeing when you're playing big boy college football. I mean, Florida's going to see week 1 against Michigan. I listed my top 5 individual matchups in that game, O-line, D-line, and 2 of them are going to come out of that game. And when you start talking about TJ McCoy going up against a guy who I think could be one of the best defensive tackles in college football this fall, a guy that's not really talked about very much. You're going to have somebody next to you who understands your assignments and understands what you're supposed to do on each and every play. Maurice Hurst is a guy week 1 for Michigan that can blow things up and can cause problems. Now, you're going to have situations where you're either going fast, you're going to have situations where the defensive line maybe moves and shifts right before the ball is snapped, and the center doesn't have time to turn and make a call. The center doesn't have time to turn and let you know how a certain blocking scheme is going to change or protection is going to change. But when you have that continuity and the expectation of what's going to happen next to you, and you understand I need to verbalize something to the right side, the left side's going to know that. I only have time to do it one direction. That's how you get to the next level as an offensive line. That's where an offensive line goes from good to great, and that's where you can begin to do a whole lot of different things up front from a protection standpoint, changing plays, even implementing different blocking schemes. If you're running an outside zone play and the center has a wide shade, instead of trying to reach that guy, you make a clamp call and the guard blocks down and the center pulls around. Those are things that all come with experience and really playing next to each other. The thing about playing offensive line is there's no way to learn how to do it without doing it against somebody who's trying to make you look bad. And to even go further than that, there's no way for a group to learn how to do it without going out there and doing it with each other against a group that's trying to make you look bad. So basically, the only way to really learn how to do it and do it well is by game reps and game experience. And a lot of these guys will have that together. And there's some movement. And that's sort of really a story across the entire league this fall is the movement of quality and all SEC caliber draftable offensive linemen. I mean, we mentioned Martez is going to go from guard to tackle. Braden Smith at Auburn is going to go from guard to tackle. William Clapp at LSU is going center to guard. Zach Bailey at South Carolina is going from guard to tackle. Jay Sean Robertson at Tennessee is going to go from guard to center. I mean, it's just team after team after team after team, guys who have proven themselves. They're proven commodities at their position, and they're going to play somewhere new. Well, that can disrupt your camaraderie because you've got a guy who's proving. We know what we have at this spot, and now he's going to change positions, and the communication changes, and somebody new or young or inexperienced has to come in, and that changes a whole lot. So being young is one thing, but having experience next to each other in games and that understanding of how to react to certain situations and who's going to react certain ways and what the expectations are of the guys next to you. And to be honest with you, it's one of the reasons that Florida wasn't it wasn't rated number 1 or number 2 in offensive lines going into the season. Is you saw a lot of guys playing as individuals last fall. They're bailing out on double teams early. They're not keeping their eyes inside protection and trying to help that backside guard or center when they're sliding. They're not looking out in pass protection when no one's on them or their guy drops in zone coverage and immediately getting back inside or looking for help right away. There was a lot of individual play along the offensive line a year ago, and that's something that if it's improved, that's an offensive line that can go a long way.
Yeah, getting back to the offensive line real quick about what you said, Cole, about Martez Ivey sliding over to left tackle. If you remember, Martez Ivey won the SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week twice this year at the guard position and at the left tackle position. So we know that, Martez can have success over there in the SEC. And going back to what you said about how Florida's line kind of looked played it as individuals, I wasn't really the biggest David Sharp fan at Florida while he was there. I think he was just a physical freak in size and in athleticism. But as far as his, I guess his fundamentals go, I think there was something always left to be desired at the left tackle position with David Sharp. And I would argue that when Martez Ivey stepped over to left tackle because David Sharp got hurt last year, I would argue, and to your point about TJ McCoy as well, when Cam Dillard went down, I think the offensive line just went through the roof as far as is just complete 180 as opposed to what they had been earlier in the season. Wouldn't you agree?
You put different guys in and you get different results because people do different things well. And I'm definitely not going to poop on Cam Dillard because I thought he played well when he was in. And I thought he did a really nice job. Now, TJ McCoy comes in and brings just a different style of ball. He's got a lower center of gravity. He's a little short and stocky. And, he's a dude that just has a little more pop, a little more oomph coming off the football. That's why I said that, he's able to get that movement at the point of attack from the center position that you just don't see a lot of guys capable of doing. So there were times when Martez looked really natural out there. Like I said, going back and when I studied that South Carolina game this offseason, I was impressed with a lot of what I saw, but there are certain things that if they're not cleaned up and people get 2-3 games of tape on it in one season, they're going to be able to take advantage of. I agree with you on David Sharp. When you see him and you see him move and you see the things that he's capable of, you want to tell yourself that kid should be a mid to late first-round draft pick, because all the tools are there, everything's there, and it just didn't really seem to come together. Whether it was attitude, whatever it was, mindset, whether somebody was in his ear telling him that he was going to the first round, whatever, I don't know, but it didn't seem to come together last fall. But the ability was there, so that's something that you talk about, having talent and talent in different places, where I do think this line can excel because of what some guys are able to do in different places.
Cole, it looks like the guard spot has 3 guys for 2 spots, and Tyler Jordan, Fred Johnson, and Brett Heggie. Heggie came on during the spring, but in studying Jordan and Johnson, do the Gators have what it takes to be tougher inside? I know that's kind of hard to gauge there, but with new offensive line coach you mentioned, the running game with Jordan Scarlett hasn't had the best blocking help inside. Is this a position where the Gators can expect to see some improvement with those 3 guys fighting for the 2 spots?
I think so. And I think a lot goes back to mindset. And first off, you got a center they're helping you get movement and helping you at the point of attack. That's a big bonus for any guard, especially in the run game. And I think we'll see a little more north-south running attack from Florida this fall. Just to sort of try and get that mindset in that, not just short yardage situations, whether it's controlling the tempo of the game, controlling the attitude of the game, they're able to do that. So I like Tyler Jordan. I think he's a guy who's powerful. And I don't ever think it's a bad thing to have 3 guards who can play. You talk to most offensive line coaches, they'll tell you that they want their 2 starting guards, and they usually want a swing guard. There's usually 2 mindsets. The guy who wants just the 5 best players on the field, and that's when you'll see if the center goes down, the left tackle will go down to center, the right guard will kick out. One guy getting hurt, all of a sudden there's 3 changes along the offensive line. That's not really the way that I would play it if I was coaching it. But a lot of coaches do want to have a swing guard or a swing tackle, and because they know he's probably, from a talent perspective, the next best guy up, and so they'll plug him in at left or right guard. So I don't think it's ever a negative to have at least one other guard who's legitimately pushing for playing time. He could probably take playing time from either guy. And you see teams like Kentucky now; they're rolling whole new offensive lines in. I mean, Kentucky's playing regularly 9 guys a game and substituting every few series. Ole Miss is the same way. And Matt Luke will do it there on a little bit more of an individual basis. He'll sub the left side, and he'll sub the right side, and he'll sub an individual for a series. So a lot of these teams are starting now to play more offensive linemen. Some of it has to do with pace and tempo. Some of it has to do with just you don't have the practice time during the week to get guys ready, and you need to get them game reps to sort of figure out what you have.
Cole, I'd like to address the elephant in the room. The question we've been talking about for the last 3 months. Zaire Franks, who starts for the Gators against Michigan? And we saw on Twitter that a couple weeks ago you had put out some of Zaire's film at Notre Dame and actually showed how he can really move in the pocket really well and kind of create some plays with his legs. And, he does look down the field and he has some zip on his throws. I'm a firm believer that Zaire came to Florida to start, not to sit on the bench or compete for a starting job. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
I do. And I'm going to say that I think Malik Zaire starts against Michigan. I don't know if he plays the entire game. I don't know if he takes every snap. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't be 100% confident that he'd be starting against Tennessee 2 weeks later. But I do think in an opener like that, against an opponent like that, with what you're going to see from Maurice Hurst and Rashawn Gary up front in that defensive line, you need somebody that's savvy and someone who understands and has been around the game and is just a veteran of football. And I think that Mac and Nuss can put a game plan together to sort of assist maybe some of the things that Malik Zaire might not be strong at, and try to work around that and manage around that. So for me, I think he starts. I'm not even going to say that I guarantee that means he takes every snap of the game. He definitely could see 2. And even if he starts and goes the whole game, I don't think that will signify that he will be the guy against Tennessee, unless it's just an amazing performance. And we hear Coach Mack come out and say, hey, love what we saw. He's our guy moving forward. If he stamps it right there after the game, then it's possible. But I think this is something that could potentially trickle on for the first few weeks. Just go back to his time at Alabama with Nick Saban. I mean, it was a regular occurrence that they knew what they had in one guy, but they wanted to take it into the first few games of the season to get those game reps to ultimately be the end-all, be-all deciding factor of who should be the starting quarterback for their football team.
Cole, if let's say that Zaire does end up the starter there, part of his game and his experience is the read option game. And if Florida does roll with that and lets him play to his strengths and installs a solid read option package, how might the blocking schemes change, and how might the unit that you've seen on tape adapt to that?
I mean, you haven't seen a lot of it, so I think just from a play calling perspective there, it would be different because you haven't seen it. There are a couple of ways to block it. You can block it from sort of a power G scheme counter perspective where you're blocking guys back and you're pulling guys. You can block it just as a regular zone play, and that fits into your RPO schemes usually when you just run inside or outside zone. Quarterback can pull it if that backside defensive end linebacker is not staying at home. And then when he pulls it, he can even pull it up again and throw the football. So I would think it would be more based on the RPO mentality, and that's how Florida would probably want to show it if you're going to see it. I think that's easier to install than trying to work on some G-scheme techniques and some power techniques that they may not have as much familiarity with. It's not that Florida doesn't run counter. I mean, Florida runs counter, Florida runs power. We've seen it. It's just hadn't done it from the quarterback in the design run capacity that much. So I think if you can attach an RPO to it, and you can make a zone read option play where the quarterback has the opportunity to keep the football and can hurt you with his legs and break you down with his legs, that becomes probably the most valuable play that you could add to your arsenal.
Cole, let's jump forward to week one, and you've discussed it here. The big matchup versus Michigan. It figures to be a tough, physical, knock you in the math, the type of game, and that starts in the trenches. And I've seen you say on Twitter and on here, this is a matchup you're really looking forward to seeing early in the season. Michigan with Rashawn Gary, he figures to be a force, at defensive end, and Brian Moan and Maurice Hurst at defensive tackles. Michigan brings a lot of talent to that defensive line position. Is there a specific matchup where Florida may have an advantage?
As far as just only a unit?
Yes.
Probably not, honestly, because I think if Gary is matched up, Gary on Jawan Taylor would be probably a push for me right now. I would probably give Gary the edge if he's lined up on Ivy, just because we haven't seen a ton of Martez out there. And Rashawn Gary is a good football player, and I think I give Maurice Hurst an advantage over almost any center or guard in the country. I mean, there's a small handful of guys that I wouldn't say Maurice Hurst has the advantage there. But to me, that's a small part of the equation, especially if you're talking about implementing some of the plays, a zone read capacity or an RPO capacity that we talked about before. You can really neutralize those kind of players. The second, third level of that defense is what would concern me. I don't know if they're going to be as active across the board. They were much deeper on that defensive line last year than people want to give them credit for. They had a lot of guys that could cause problems. People can talk about the statistics or should he have been invited to New York or not, but Jabril Peppers did a lot for that defense last year. Really, just to be able to disguise coverages and show different fronts and play different positions really enables them to keep the same personnel in the field and not have to adjust from a substitution standpoint with offenses that they face. So that's a big advantage for your defense. And I just think speed is going to be the difference in this game. I think especially when Florida's on offense, I'm not sure that Michigan defense will be able to run with a lot of what Florida has. And if there's some quick ball distribution, which you would expect out of an inexperienced or new quarterback in the system, then I think you'll see that speed pay big dividends. And I just think the Florida offense has a chance to run past the Michigan defense. Now, they try to go right at them. They try to run between the tackles 25, 30 times. That's advantage Michigan. So I don't expect Mack and Nuss to go in thinking our best option is to attack Maurice Hurst and Rashawn Gary in that Michigan defensive line, because even if it ends up being a push, a lot of times that's advantage defense.
Cole Cubelic. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Cole Cubelic joining us here on SEC on Gators Breakdown here. We'll get one more question from Joey and Bill, and then Cole, we'll let you get out of here if you don't mind.
Hey, Cole, another question on the Michigan game, going to the other side of the football about Florida's defense against Michigan's offense. I think this is a game that's right up Florida's alley as far as defense goes. Michigan obviously lost a lot of starters on offense. They don't even really know who the quarterback's going to be. I mean, I guess they do know, but they're kind of keeping it close to the vest. We've seen Wilton Spate before last year. He had his ups and downs, had a few good games and had a few absolutely terrible games. He doesn't scare me in the least, actually. But I think Florida's young defense, this is the perfect game, I guess, to start the season off with, because they're going against an offense that really is unproven in many ways. And I think this is a momentum booster for the defense. If Florida's defense can have a good game against Michigan's offense, I can definitely see, Florida's defense kind of picking up some momentum going into that Tennessee game 2 weeks later. Can you see Florida's defense kind of dominating Michigan's offense, considering Michigan's offense really is a bigger question mark than Florida's at this point?
I could see it, but a lot of it will depend on what type of a game this turns into. And if this turns into a slow, sort of physical boxing match type game, then that could end up being advantage Michigan, because just from a personnel grouping standpoint, I mean, Michigan's going to go two tight ends. They're going to bring in Wheatley, Bunting, and some of those guys. They're going to go fullback. They're going to go 32 personnel with two fullbacks in the high formation. They're going to try to go right at you. And Mason Cole is one of the better offensive linemen in college football. He'll be back at tackle this fall for Michigan, but they will test just how stout that Florida D-line is. And like I said, Kari Clark, Taven Bryan, CeCe Jefferson, I like those guys. I feel good about those guys. But if that type of game is the one that breaks out, then late in the game, potentially substitutions could be an issue. And the defensive line, front seven depth could be an issue for Florida. I don't see that happening. And if it gets into a situation where Florida has to throw the football 35, 45 times in this game, that's a big advantage Florida, in my opinion, because I think they have guys who can win one-on-ones in pass rush situations. If Michigan tries to rely on screens, I think that can be advantage Florida, because this defense will be able to outrun the Michigan offense. But if it turns into a fist fight, and if it turns into a mano-a-mano, let's try to break each other's face masks, that could be advantage Michigan, and all of a sudden you keep Florida's offense off the field, you slow the pace and the tempo of the game, you take away some momentum, and potentially could change the outcome. I like Florida in the game, but that would be the style of game that Jim Harbaugh and Michigan would have to play in order to find success, in my opinion.
Cole, that kind of reminds me of the good old days when people used to say, hey, you don't want to get in a track meet with Florida. So it kind of makes me happy that you're saying that again. It's been a while, on that note, just one final question from me. It's obvious that Florida's had its offensive struggles over the past decade, really, for since Tebow left, and McElwain, has obviously retooled the offensive line. They improved their sacks allowed from 121 in 2015, which is abysmal, down to 68 in 2016. Yeah, this past year they were still 116th in total offense, 113 in rushing yards, and a slightly improved 79th in passing offense. Is there a particular stat that we can kind of focus on without, being too myopic to look at the end of the season and say, hey, this was a good indicator that the offensive line improved?
Third down conversion percentage. Because I think that with either a young quarterback or a new quarterback who has struggled with consistency in the past, whoever wins that job, and then in short-yardage situations when the game's on the line or when you have to have points, you got to move the chain. So I think if this offense is finding a way to do that and having someone under center with an understanding of, if it's 3rd and 4, tuck the football, run, pick up the first down, slide, and let's restart a new set of downs. Or when to take a 10-yard out instead of taking a deep shot when you know that's going to lead to a first down instead of potentially throwing your defense back on the field. It's one thing I talk about with coaches and coordinators all the time, especially coordinators, offensive in particular. Hall coach a game. And so many times I see guys that are they're coaching for first downs, they're coaching for yards, for points. And the offensive coordinators, in my opinion, who are really great, are the ones that understand how to coach to win a football game. And that trickles down to the players. And I think their understanding of situational football gets lost at times. So if you have a team that understands why moving the change is important, how to figure out to move the change at certain times, and what to do to make that happen, I think that's going to show you if the offensive line has gel, understands protection, understands how to move the ball in short yardage situations, and a quarterback behind them that has just an understanding and a grasp of the game, in that it's not about taking shots, it's not about throwing deep balls, it's not about scoring 45 points, it's about winning football games.
Yeah, all about winning football games. Cole, I can't thank you enough for joining us. Listeners out there, remember you can find Cole on Twitter at Cole Cubelic, also on his radio show, The Cole Cubelic Show, Sports Radio, 7:30 a.m. and 103.9 FM in Huntsville, Alabama. And this fall, Saturday nights on the SEC Network. Cole, thanks so much for joining Gators Breakdown.
No, man, it was fun. I enjoyed it, and I'm sorry I couldn't get the technology going where I needed to, but look forward to hopefully doing it again soon.
Hey, it kind of helped us out. This is the first time we've tried this with the phone, so I think it worked pretty well.
Thank you, Cole.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man.
Thanks.
We'll be rooting you on this fall, man. Do your thing.
All right, there we go. Guys,
he hung up on you, Joey.
That was some good stuff, guys.
Yeah, without a doubt, man. There's so much to talk about here, but I thought Cole was excellent, and I feel like our listeners and myself, I was getting into some meat and potatoes football there, man. That was good stuff.
He pretty much answered every question I had. He answered in his first little I'll call it
soliloquy.
Yeah, I'll call it monologue.
Yeah, I think he talked for about 15 minutes straight without taking a breath. Man,
I had a question about Martez Ivey. I had a question about TJ McCoy. And he answered it all. I didn't even have to ask him about that. So
I mean, I'm glad he agreed with me about Malik Zaire, because obviously I'm not too crazy after all. So
no,
I've only been saying it for 4 months, but people are slowly finally coming to the realization that I was right all along. Bill,
I've disagreed with you about a great many things, but that has not been one of them.
Yeah, so. I know. I'm just giving you a hard time.
I think we've all seen that coming.
Yeah, with camp starting this week, a couple of days from now, we finally get to talk some freaking football. After the, last week we got the recruiting crazy week. We can move past that just a little bit.
Yeah.
Probably.
I know we don't talk NFL on here, but there's the first game of the NFL preseason is in 2 days. It's crazy.
I swear,
Cardinals.
About 5 minutes ago, I had this moment, and I was just sitting there listening to you guys talk, and I was like, oh man, here comes football season. It's finally back.
It is.
I love covering recruiting. I love covering the camps and all this stuff, but man, it's almost here. I'm so excited.
But that's the thing. I like recruiting. I don't love it. I don't love it like I do Saturday afternoons in the fall. That's my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
That's my wheelhouse. That's what I know. That's what that's what I can't wait for. We've blown up. Joey was with me last year. Bill, we brought you on in February. Gators Breakdown has blown up since that time. So, a lot of listeners out there will get to hear us for the first time during football season. And look, we can't wait. We're going to have 3 shows.
David, we probably had about 50 listeners the first couple shows. I mean, we were struggling to get past 40. 50.
I was happy when we hit 100.
Yeah, when we hit 100, it was, and then it steadily grew over the season, and then Bill graced us with his presence, and it started to grow even more. People like to come on and laugh at Bill, and so we get a lot more listeners. And to be honest, guys, the last couple of months have just been a blast. I mean, we've really made this offseason fun for not only ourselves, but we've made it fun for other people. And I get nothing but compliments from our listeners out there that say, how great of a job we do. And we just can't even thank the listeners enough, because obviously we would be nothing without them. But now that football season actually is here, David, and we've made it 365 days, you and I think we started, our first show was the week before the Gators season started. Isn't that correct? I think it was the Monday before. I think it was the Monday before the season started was our first show. So we're coming up on our 1 year anniversary, and just the fact that we're peaking at thousands of listeners every week, every show, as opposed to the 50 that we were getting a year ago. We can attribute that to Bill's great knowledge. Bill, we bow to you. We bow to you in your 5-star nerd recruiting advice, and we can't thank you enough. But having Cole Cubelic on is that's like having a kind of like a rock star of his field on. I mean, Cole Cubelic is a rock star of the Southeastern Conference. I mean, if our listeners out there know that when you follow him on Twitter, you get an education every time you look at his Twitter account, and it is awesome that we had somebody of that stature on our show, and that can't be stated enough. I hope everybody got an education tonight, because I did. Bill, did you get an education, or is your arrogance and pride still stuck on that nobody knows more than you do?
Were you talking about me just now, or Cole?
You.
No, I meant before that, not the arrogant part. No, I thought it was amazing. I loved sitting there listening to him talking about the G schemes versus the zone blocking, and I kind of wanted to touch on that before we go. He was saying that, just to kind of recap there, I asked him if this read option package with Zaire, if he's the quarterback, it'll change the way they block things. And he kind of mentioned that they would probably go with a zone blocking scheme to kind of simplify and install RPO, or run pass option. And just a reminder to our listeners, that does not always mean that the quarterback is going to drop back and either run or pass. It's a line call, and he may call a handoff, depending on the alignment of the defense, or you may stay in the pass play. It's an option at the line. But anyway, but I liked that, because that puts things in the hands of the veteran senior quarterback that you brought in. You expect him to be heady. He's been around a while, and furthermore, it kind of fits with the way Mac does business. He likes to call all these different formations and run the same play out of multiple formations. He likes to simplify things for his guys and make it confusing for the defense. I think that's what you're going to see.
And has never thrown an interception, Bill. That's huge.
No.
Never thrown an interception. He takes care of the football.
That's right. Not a lot of touchdowns. He's only got, 6 touchdowns, but 6 touchdowns to 0 interceptions matters, and he's had a couple of big games, and even in his rough games, didn't turn the ball over.
Yep. We mentioned camp starting, guys. So before we sign off here, besides quarterback, what are you guys most looking forward to? We don't have to go into great depths here. We got plenty of time for that. But besides quarterback, is there something out there you guys are really looking forward to? And, for me, and I hate to kind of continue on to what we've already been talking about, but it is this offensive line for me. I can't tell you how many times there's opening cupcake games where this Florida offensive line comes out and looks like they're just not ready to play whatsoever. Looks like they can't bust a grape. UMass and North Texas's guys are getting in the backfield, and running backs don't have room to run. I'm ready to see that change. I'm ready for Brad Davis to come in and instill in these guys that that's not okay. You need to come out. You need to fire on the ball. That second half against LSU last year, that's what we need to see game in and game out. We don't need to see, as I mentioned, cupcakes, being able to control the line of scrimmage. That's probably been my biggest knock on McElwain since he's been here. Not necessarily on him. We know the first year struggles with not having great depth at offensive line, but last year still at times with Summers leading the offensive line, it still looked at times to where these guys just weren't ready to play and just didn't really care to play. That kind of changed when McCoy came in at center. As Cubelic mentioned, they got a little bit more fire on the ball. But I'm ready. I'm really looking forward to see this offensive line coming out and just taking over a game.
David, it's not a coincidence that McElwain said after the season, the number one priority is to get physical up front. He knew that the shortfalls of the big boys up front. And what did he do to fix that? He let Summers go off to Louisville, and he went and hired Brad Davis out of North Texas. Not many people knew Brad Davis. I know we had a show pretty much dedicated to all the hires that Florida made, during that week. I don't know if Bill was on with us yet. I think that was in January, so I don't think Bill was on with us yet. But we did an entire show about, trying to figure out what these hires meant for Florida. And we really didn't know at the time, David, but from all accounts, as far as not just recruiting and coaching, but Brad Davis is that guy. He is that guy that the players love playing for. And Bill, this goes back to your recruiting point about getting an IMG player. That was all Brad Davis. I mean, the first player to IMG, to come to Florida. I mean, you get your foot in the door at IMG, I mean, many things could happen. So, props to him and the recruiting department for doing that. But I think Brad Davis is one of those guys that's going to be a fast up-and-comer in the coaching ranks. I could see him moving up very fast from all I hear. And I think this year, Cole Cubelic hit it on the head. If you get productive play out of Martez Ivy at the left tackle position, the sky's the limit for this offensive line.
Yeah, one little tidbit on recruiting, and we're not really focused on that this week, but, it goes so far beyond stars and rankings versus rivals. One of the things we haven't seen the last few years is the Gators getting the guys they're supposed to get based on their stronghold areas. And IMG is not one of those. It's anything but that. But Dunlap came from Jacksonville Ed White. We talked about that. And not just him, but getting guys like Bernie and getting guys in the areas that they should be able to own. They are reestablishing their recruiting footprint, and that is a huge deal. This is the first time we've seen that. The order is being reestablished, at least for now, and it's got to continue. But, yeah, it is a huge deal on more than one front.
Yep. Any one thing you guys are looking forward to with camp starting?
Oh, I got something. I want to see how a few of these defensive linemen show up to camp, and meaning their weight and their physical shape. And I'm sorry, I can't remember who this was on my Twitter today. One of my followers kind of mentioned that Ja'Kai Polite had mentioned that he was hoping to get up close to 290 in an interview or something, come in really heavy at camp. And he's only like 6'2". But as much as I've had concerns about the defensive tackle position, if Polite can get up even in the 280s and come in and still be both physical and show athleticism and move his feet and have a good center of gravity, and if he can play low and give them that third guy or even that fourth guy alongside Kyrie Campbell, that changes the outlook of that position tremendously. And then the other one that everybody's waiting for, the guy's posting on Twitter, Antonius Clayton. He told me about a month and a half ago, I think he was up to 255 and was planning to come in at 260 in camp. If he's able to do that, and these guys can hold on to that weight as they're running gassers in camp and doing all those things and conditioning, they may have added the weight along that defensive line, them and a couple others, to really make an impact, and that could really, really benefit this young back seven.
I'm gonna speak on something we didn't talk about last week. I know we didn't want to be a buzzkill, but how about the Marcel Harris injury? We talked about Jaywan Taylor moving into that safety spot, but Bill, you saw me on Twitter, and I had a lot of people that agreed with me. I'd move Chauncey Gardner back to safety. Chauncey's played safety. He played it in high school. He played safety last year a little bit, and he had success at the safety position last year. I think Chauncey Gardner would actually not be a drop-off at all from Marcel Harris if you moved him back to the safety position. And I think you can kind of play a little bit more with the corner position because you got some young guys coming in. But I think you need a little more composure and solidarity in the back end with Nick Washington and a guy like Chauncey Gardner that's played that position before and has had success at that position before, as opposed to bringing in a guy in Jaywan Taylor that's never played. I understand that, Chauncey's already been solidified as a defensive back at the cornerback position next to Duke Dawson. But, Florida's got some really talented corners coming in Marco Wilson, guys like CJ Henderson and guys like that. I just really think that I would love to see freshmen be put into that position kind of. And I made a comment to Bill, and he didn't like it too much, about Joseph Putu, the JUCO transfer that McElwain stole from Arkansas. Putu's played good in spots, Bill. I know you talked about his stats and stuff, but, you turn on the game tape, Putu played quite a bit last year. And he played well, and he was really good on special teams too, which you got to be able to tackle to play special teams. So, I wouldn't even mind seeing Putu play a lot of corner as well because he's got experience. He played last year. I would much rather see Chauncey Gardner move to safety. I don't know if that's going to happen. You might see it get played with, but that safety position is something that I got my eye on big time. We knew the positions were set up until a week and a half ago, and now, Bill, we basically took a 52 card deck and just threw it up in the air. And we're going to see where the cards land because that's a big position that needs to be filled. Marcel Harris was a veteran. He was the second leading tackler on the team. And I really am interested to see how that safety position is going to look come 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, we definitely didn't get into that, but yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. When it becomes a problem, does it become a problem against the Michigan game with their power run game? Does it become a problem with Tennessee? Even though they're a spread team, they still at least a little bit last year wanted to run power game out of that spread. LSU, Georgia. I think by that time you're kind of hoping the Marcel Harris injury is not something you have to talk about going against LSU and Georgia that late in the season. But I do wonder, first game against the year with that power run game versus Michigan, you would like to have another guy who can stick his head in that box and be an extra linebacker.
That's Chauncey, David.
Yeah. I mean,
but here's the thing. Joey, keep mute there for just a second. We've got a little volume issue. The problem is that it doesn't just affect the safety position or the corner position. It also affects the linebackers and the defensive line. We've got to get in a situation here where we have the back seven supported with that safety as far as in the pass coverage, but you've also got the linebackers that are going to have to worry about gap integrity. If you have young linebackers that start to freelance and get out of their lane and over pursue, that running game can get gashed if we don't have that safety providing us support. So we've got to see if he can do that like Marcel Harris did. We've got to see if they can find the DBs next to them to play up at the same level that he would have outside. So we'll see.
The game I got circled on the calendar this year, David, and not many people do, some people do, is that Kentucky game at Lexington in late September. That's a game that really makes me nervous because Kentucky's going to be a pretty good team this year. And I really hope that safety position is solidified after the first 3-4 weeks of the season going into Lexington, because that game makes me really, really nervous, Bill. And the only thing I can hope for is that the Florida's defense is a lot better in week 4 than it is in week 1. And that's something that we can only hope for, is the growth and development of Florida's defense, especially the defensive backs. I'm not so much worried about, obviously, defensive line, the linebackers. It's that secondary now, minus the leadership of Marcel Harris. I just don't know where Florida turns to right now, and that's the thing that I'm going to be paying attention to most in camp. Like you said, Bill, about the defensive line, I'm going to be looking on the back end, the backside. The offense is what it is. We talked about it ad nauseum for the last 6 months. Let's see how the defense shows up.
Yeah, and like you said, man, I mean, Chauncey Gardner's great. He could even be a better safety, and I think he is a better NFL prospect than Marcel Harris was. But the biggest loss is you don't get to have Marcel Harris and Chauncey Gardner on the field at the same time. You're probably going to end up with 1 to 2 freshman DBs starting by midseason. That's my guess, because I don't think Putu's your answer long term. We got to get those linebackers to play discipline, even though they're young. I don't think there's an upperclassman in the bunch. We got to get those defensive tackles some depth there, and they got to stay healthy. But if you can do that, and if we can allow Chauncey Gardner to run free, and he can be the maybe future first-round safety that he shows he can be, and tying for the team lead in interceptions, leading the team in interception yards, he's going to help that secondary. It's going to create turnovers. He's going to make plays. It's too bad we don't get to see Marcel Harris back there with him.
You want to hear a crazy stat, Bill, about Chauncey Gardner? This is 100% true.
What do you think? Do you think I enjoy a good stat?
No. This is a kind of off the field stat. Chauncey Gardner hated sports growing up. He didn't start playing football until he was 15 years old.
Wow, that is interesting.
True story. Yep. He didn't like sports. His stepfather got him into football when he was 14 or 15. I know his cousin. So I live in obviously Brevard County where he's from. So, and his cousin lives right around the corner from me. He's from Cocoa, which is only 20 minutes north of me. So
awesome.
Yeah. All right, guys, that audio sound better now?
Yeah, we're good, Dave.
Okay, it must have had something to do with my mic.
I got a little confused when I was hearing my own echo. I thought I'd eaten the wrong mushrooms or something.
Okay.
The wrong ones? Oh, Bill. Bill, the kids might be around, Bill. Watch yourself. They have run into your computer room from time to time when we've been on air. I know your kids have run into the room before.
One time my son did. I don't think our listeners ever knew, but it happened.
You're not giving your kids mushrooms too, are you?
No. Not until they're 8.
I remember being on a show with Chad Neepling. Joey knows him. He used to be an Arkansas guy. Yeah. He got out of the business, but I was doing a show with him on SEC Breakdown one time, and his son comes in. Daddy, I got a poopy.
While we were on air.
We were doing our Florida Arkansas.
Yes, we were doing our Florida Arkansas preview, and his son comes in. That was the 1,000% true story. I think that actually put him out off of Twitter for a while because I don't think he ever came back after that. He's actually back now. He actually hit me up on Twitter. He's back. He reactivated his account. He did. But actually, what's funny is right after that was late in the season. I didn't see him on Twitter anymore. And I actually messaged Dave like a month or two later. I said, "Is Chad all right? I haven't heard from him in a while." I think he was so embarrassed about his son.
If that ever happens, I'm just going to bring him as a special guest. He's going to be Gators, and then he's going to leave. So.
I tried to keep my composure. When that happened, but it was really hard.
That was funny. Yep. All right, guys. I think we're going to sign off here. Anything else you guys want to bring up right quick?
No, man. I'm just so happy that we're almost to football season. My goodness.
Camp.
I'm happy about the recruits, man. 11 recruits in 12 days. 11 commits in 12 days. Come on. You can't deny the just how awesome it is.
Nope.
So.
Oh, it's fantastic.
For sure. Long time coming, too. So that's what it feels good. So later this week, Thomas Goldcamp for 24/7 Sports. Gatorbait.net will join me. We'll probably do that Wednesday. It will be a little camp preview from Thomas and the guys, or him at 24/7. So he's got some previews up now of camp position previews. So get Thomas in here and he can discuss his thoughts on what we'll see in camp coming up. Thursday night is when camp, or I guess Thursday morning probably is when camp starts. So looking forward to that. With
Thursday.
Getting him back on here. So for Cole, who joined us, Cole Cubelic, who joined us earlier, talking offensive and defensive line. Great guest there. So plenty to talk about. So glad he could join us. And then, like I said, Thomas later this week. So for Bill and Joey, I'm Dave. Thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.